Hey, what's up, Spencer? My name is Everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about my very first book haul of the year. Now you might be wondering, Spencer, where did you get these fabulous, fabulous books? And if your guess was steal them from a psych hospital, then you are not wrong. But you're also not right either. I technically did not steal these. So at work the other day, I was behind the nurse's station and I saw one of our abandoned bookcases filled with books, and I said, why are all of these books back here? It makes it so that none of the patients have access to them. And so I brought all of the books out into our patient bookshelf, but before I did, I sorted through them and took out the ones that I personally wanted to read. So I'm not technically neglecting my patients from having access to any reading material, especially since I'm the person who mainly supplies the books to the patient bookcase. So I'm gonna say that I'm in the good, but feel free to admonish me in the comments below. The first book that I have is Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. I've heard of this book many times before, but I had never really looked into what this is about. I do know Maya Angelou and I am familiar with her works, but not this one specifically. Apparently this is her autobiography, so I would love to learn a lot more about her and what happened in her life. I'm not really going to read anything into the synopsis of this book because for things like this, I kind of just want to read and be surprised, see what I find. Isn't that the fun of reading books, is sometimes having no idea what you're gonna get yourself into. Next up, I have Taffy of Torpedo Junction by Neil Wise Wetcher. When I was going through the bookcase, I noticed that there was a Nazi cross on this cover, which made me instantly go, because anytime I see Nazi stuff, I gotta do a double take. It turns out that this book is about a 13-year-old who is living through World War II, and I love historical fiction, and this is apparently for juveniles, which is ages 8 through 14. I would love to read this because, like I said, love historical fiction, especially World War II historical fiction, and nice to have good short little reads sometimes so I can really bump up my reading book count for the year and try and hit 150 books like I keep on doing every year. Next up, I have a classic, Little House on the Prairie by Laura Ingalls Wilder. I believe we are all pretty familiar with this little main character. I think her name is also Laura. Yes, Laura, little Laura and her family pack up and live on the plains and do their best to not die of dysentery. I have read this book before, but I haven't read it in quite a long time, and I've seen Books and Lala do videos in which she goes back and rereads old favorites from elementary school and middle school and high school, and I'm actually pretty interested in doing something similar, so I'm always grabbing books like this when I can in preparation for doing a video like that. Next up, I have The Round House by Louise Erdrich. Yeah, I believe that's how you pronounce it. This book is about the murder of a Native woman in 1988 and how this affects her family, I believe. I'm very interested in reading this book because the murder of Indigenous women is incredibly high, and most murders and missing persons cases of Indigenous women never get reported or solved or looked into in the least, so I really would love to read a book that goes into that and how these types of things affect the families of these women who never get seen again. Next up is There There by Tommy Orange, which is another Native American based book about 12 different characters going to a powwow and how these characters are all intertwined. I've noticed that I haven't really read a lot of stories with Native American peoples as the main character or Native American authors, so I've been looking into doing that more. So far this year, you can see I've already read This Place 150 Years Retold, which is about the Canadian First Nations history, so I'm really interested into getting into more Native American-based stories. Next up, I have The Horror Midwife by Roberta Rich, and I don't know why I picked this up, because as you can clearly see, right there, it's a sequel to The Midwife. Why can't I say Midwife today? Jesus Christ. Sequel to The Midwife of Venice. Have I read The Midwife of Venice? No. Did I take this book home with me? Yes. Why did I do that? I have this weird habit of accidentally having books on my TBR that I have never read the previous books to. Why do I keep doing this? Either way, I'm going to look up The Midwife of Venice so that I can see if this is something that I would actually be interested in, or if I should just bring this book back to work. At midnight, the dogs, cats, and rats rule Venice. The Ponte di Ghetto Nuovo, the bridge that leads to the ghetto, trembles under the weight of sacks of rotting vegetables, rancid fat, and vermin. Shapeless matter, perhaps animal, floats to the surface of the Rio de Sanguirlamo and hovers on its greasy waters. Through the mist rising from the canal. Okay, come on. Okay, so it looks like this is about how in Venice it used to be illegal for Jewish people to treat Christians medically, but something is going on where they do that anyway because they don't have, like, doctors and stuff like that, which does sound very interesting. I would like to look into that. So, I guess this is a good keep for the future. This one you've probably heard of. I certainly have. A Dog's Purpose by W. Bruce Cameron. This is one of those movies where I saw the trailer and the trailer made me cry because anything about dogs makes me cry. If you are not familiar with this, it's about a dog who loves this young boy and then dies and gets reincarnated as all these other dogs until finally he meets the little boy that he previously loved like 20 years later, which I think is super cute, and I love anything about dogs, and I am super ready to cry over this. And I'm also interested in watching the movie after to see how exactly the same they are. I feel like stuff like this, it's very easy to get the book and the movie exactly the same, you know? Next up is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. This is about our main character, Diana Bishop, who is descended from witches, coming across a mysterious magical manuscript, and she tries to not interact with it, but of course all sorts of magical, crazy things start happening, and she gets dragged into it, and of course there is a vampire, and I can almost guarantee that they fall in love, and I bet that this was published during the height of the Twilight era, which is why it's that. Look at that, 2011, I was right. Now I have The Hypnotist by Lars Kepler. This is a thriller that takes place in Sweden. Interesting. I don't think I've read any books about Sweden yet. Where a family is tragically murdered, except for this one boy who was stabbed 100 times and yet is still alive, fighting for his life in the hospital, and the detective needs to solve it. I have found that I do not like detective-based mysteries, and for some reason, I continue to— oh, it's snowing! Sorry, ADHD. Anyway, I don't like detective stories, but for some reason, I keep on trying to make myself read them. Why? I just need some spice in life, I guess. Next up, I got The Welsh Girl by Peter Ho Davies. Okay. Like I said, I like World War II historical fiction, and this is about a girl who is living in a village right after D-Day and how a POW camp is set up near her village and how the end of the war is affecting this POW camp and her village and all that. Sorry, I ate some Indian food before this, and spicy food always makes me really burpy. Next up is Death of a Maid by MC Beaton. So apparently this is a mystery in which a guy wins some maid services at an auction, and the maid comes to his house and she starts unraveling all of these mysteries related to this guy. And he doesn't want anybody to notice the things he's got going on, but too many people start noticing him, and now he's got to do something about it. I feel like this is something I'm either really gonna like or really not like. Alright, now I have Hope Rising, How the Science of Hope Can Change Your Life by Casey Gwynne and Shan Hellman. Working in a psychiatric hospital, I do work on an acute unit, so I work with a lot of people who are struggling with alcoholism or suicidal ideations and stuff like that. So I love to read self-help books and a lot of different research and other things to help learn from stuff like this and bring it into the groups that I am doing in order to help my patients more and give them different strategies to make it so they hopefully do not relapse again in the future. That is my overall desire goal. I love the people who I work with, but I never want to see them ever again. I want them to be doing so well that I never see them again in my whole entire life, except if I were to run into them at Walmart. And last but not least, I have The Dark Side by Danielle Steele. I need to take the library-esque cover off of that. Look at how shiny and plasticky. This book is about a woman who grew up with a sister who was chronically ill and how that affected her life and how it affects her growing up, and now that she's a mother, how it affects her parenting her own chillin'. Alright, those were all of the books that I stole from work. What do you think about them? Have you read any of them? Did you like them? Did you not like them? Do you think that I'm a terrible person and I'm going to hell because I took these books from sick people? I may be, but who knows, right? Either way, thanks for coming and hanging out with me. Make sure that you get your vaccines, stay safe, and have a fantastic day. Bye!